and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Martin Willis, the host. We're live tonight, which is, we usually do the news pre-recorded with Alejandro. We have a special guest coming up in just a minute. And her name is Heather Wade. And for the rest of the show, we have Dr. Richard O'Connor coming up. And I'll tell you a little bit more about him later. There are ways you can listen to the show for free. And that is live every Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 Eastern time. And that's the same time as New York City. And that's at Podcast UFO. You can also jump in the chat room there and participate. We also run on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and we have a new time slot that's pre-recorded, of course, and it's at 10 o'clock to midnight Eastern Standard Time or 7 to 9 Pacific Time. And right after that is Midnight in the Desert with Heather Wade. She's in Art Bell's seat over there, so check it out when you can. And she has the great guests that Art always had, and we're bringing Heather on right now to talk about that. Heather, how are you?
Well, it's a crazy day as usual. How are you doing, Martin?
I'm doing great. And let's talk about, you were just thrown into that position without any warning at all when Art had all those problems starting, was it October or November last year?
It was October 21st. He was doing a show with Dr. Bill Forstchen, and his neighbors saw a car drive up, and someone in that car had a rifle, fired 4 or 5 shots to the studio house that Art did his show from. And that was at about 10:20 p.m. that while Art was on the air. So he asked his guest at the time, Dr. Forstchen, to hang on for a moment. He put some music on. He went outside to check it out. And he came back inside since the shooter was gone. And he had a show he was in the middle of, and he finished the show. There were several incidents after that, too. They seemed to occur about every 3 weeks.
And then it was sometime in December. Wasn't like a Thursday night or something in December where he just said, that's it, I'm done for now because of the threats. And you jumped right in there, right?
Yep, it was a Friday. He thought out for...
Wow, we're actually having a little bit of a Skype problem with you, Heather.
Are we?
Yeah. I'm not able to hear you.
You're not?
Oh, now I can. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm very sorry about that.
That's no problem. So I've been listening to the show, and I think it's been going great. You've had some really amazing guests on there. You had Chris Cotter from the X-Files. You've had all kinds of amazing people, and it's kind of like the same tradition going on as when Art was there. I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you, and it absolutely is. Since he had to step away, even though he was increasing his security, what it really came down to was his family or his radio show, 2 things that he loves. And he ended up choosing his family and asked me if I would then host the show, which I wasn't quite sure if I was ready for. But if I'm going to do it, I thought the best way to do that is to keep it exactly in his tradition and keep the structure of the show the same. The same music, the same guests, hold it up to the same standards.
Right. I think you've been doing a great job. And the other night you had John Carricow on, who was a whistleblower for the CIA on torture, and what a great show that was. And you are, so it's not just paranormal, you're doing kind of like the old Art Bell shows were, for forever, actually. Just plain interesting guests, not always just paranormal.
That's right. Anything that concerns people. Art has often said that talk shows shouldn't be about any one thing. They should be about life. And so that means we'll cover environmental issues, we'll cover current issues, the current news, along with the paranormal.
Right. And tonight you have I think you have a UFO person on there tonight, right?
For a little bit of fun, sure. Jeff Willis is going to tell us all how we can hunt UFOs ourselves and get footage like he does. Now, on my Facebook page, it's really funny. I think people have misunderstood, and they think that Jeff is going to tell people actually how to capture a craft. I think they've misunderstood, and maybe they didn't go to his website to see all the good UFO footage that he's able to get. He has a specific technique, a way that he's able to go out and get footage on a regular basis. For years now, he's done that, and he was a guest on Coast to Coast with Art years and years ago, so I thought let's have a little fun and let's talk with Jeff Willis about what he does.
Yeah, it's Willis sounds like my name, but it's with an E. At ES at the end. No relation. I just want to make that clear. So for the people that listen to this show and want to hear the topic of UFOs or a bunch of other subjects, it's on 5 nights a week from Monday through Friday. And the time it's right after my shows when they air over at the Dark Matter Digital Network, which is, it starts at 9 o'clock Pacific time, which is midnight on the East Coast, and runs for 3 hours. It's a great fun. I hope you check it out. You don't have to listen to it live. You can always subscribe for, I think is it $5 a month or something like that?
Yeah, it's $4.99. Years ago, Art used to sell particular shows. You could get a copy of a certain show if you liked it, you know. He would often announce during the program, hey, if you want to get a copy of this show, this is how you can do it. And the price was a lot higher back then. Now a person can subscribe, become a time traveler, and then you've got access to the entire archive for $4.99. And you can get all the shows that you want. Or if you're just not a night owl or you can't be awake during those hours to listen to the show, you can always pick it up that way.
Yes, and so you can go way back into Art's archives. And Art actually showed up. I listened to the show the other day. He showed up on last Friday night. So occasionally he will show up on the show.
That's right.
So, and that'll always be exciting. And all right, Heather, well, thank you so much. And I highly encourage everyone to go check it out. Of course, you can listen on the Dark Matter Digital Network, or just go over to midnightinthedesert.com. And every day during the week, you'll see who the new guest is posted up there. And great fun. If you're a night owl and you want to listen live, that's fine. But if you want to subscribe as a podcast, check it out. And there's probably 1 or 2 shows a week that are UFO related for all you UFO fans out there.
We'll cover hauntings, we'll cover cryptozoology, we'll cover things that our government is doing or that we have proof they're doing. We'll cover environmental issues, we'll cover just about anything that's interesting. I guarantee it is a show like no other. And keep in mind, for everybody out there, you can also listen on shortwave. We're broadcast on a great shortwave station, WTWW, out of Nashville, Tennessee, at 5085 on the shortwave dial. So if you don't have, if you find yourself in an area without internet access or cell phone access, you have shortwave radio, that is a great way to pick up the show. That one affiliate covers all of the United States.
That's amazing. And there's actually, I've listened to I've listened to call-ins when people are saying that's how they're listening. So there must be quite an audience on just shortwave.
There is. There is an astounding number of people listening on shortwave select stations throughout the country, also the stream that we have. And those people wouldn't be there if it wasn't something interesting. There are people that show up every single night. They don't want to miss it because we're always doing something very interesting. Thursday, for St. Patrick's Day, we're going to have Dennis Stone on to talk about America's Stonehenge. I don't know how many of you know that America does have its very own Stonehenge. We're going to find out all about that Thursday night. And I'm working on getting an actual human alien hybrid on the show for next week. So these are things you don't want to miss.
Oh, my goodness. How about that? I didn't even know that. Wow, interesting. Well, Heather, thanks so much. And I really appreciate you filling in for Alejandro. Of course, this isn't UFO news, but I really appreciate you filling in.
I didn't know I was filling in for someone right now.
Well, I said we'll have a special guest, and then you are the special guest, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, it's a pleasure to come on, and I hope the rest of your show with your guest is a lot of fun.
Great. All right, Heather, you take care.
Take it easy, Martin. Break a leg.
All right. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So getting back to our guest, that, of course, was Heather Wade from the Dark Matter, from the Midnight in the Desert. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather still. For those of you who know that I actually had to skip a show back, I'm still have to take a couple of cough breaks here and there, but I am carrying on and seem to be getting a little bit better as we go along. About our guest tonight, Dr. Richard O'Connor, a little bit about him. He's an American physician who has practiced anesthesiology for 27 years, excuse me, at St. Peter's Hospital in Helena, Montana. Early in his career, he became closely acquainted with Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., who was on the medical staff there. And after learning of Dr. Marcel's involvement as a first-hand witness to the event we know as the Roswell incident, of course, and after getting to know Dr. Marcel, not only as a medical colleague, but also as a close friend, Dr. O'Connor became convinced that American citizens were not being told the truth about what actually transpired at Roswell and other situations. It's become his mission to do what he can to help to set the record straight. Now, I met Richard in Phoenix, and I'm actually really looking forward to the show tonight. And Alejandro Rojas will be on next week. So, pardon me. All right, everyone. So hang in there right after this quick music break, and I mean a quick one tonight, and we'll be right back with our guest, Dr. O'Connor. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Martin. I'm doing well, thanks.
Good. And we met out in Phoenix, and wasn't that a great time out there?
You know, that's about the third time that I've been to that International UFO Congress, and each time I go, I'm always amazed at the information that's shared there and the quality of the presentations that are made. And so, yeah, I really enjoy going to that. I feel like I learn a lot every time I go.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, that was only my second time there, but I really enjoyed it. So anyone listening live, you can jump over and get right into the chat room. I'm just visiting that right now and say hello to all of you over there. And if you have any questions for our guests as we're moving along tonight, feel free to put them in our chat room, and I'll try to ask our guests. So that is the Roswell Library. The Marcel Library. That's something you put together. and what a great little building that is. And you live in Montana. Can you tell? Well, let me just put it this way: did you have an interest in UFOs at all before you spoke with Dr. Marcel?
Not really. I don't recall paying a lot of attention to it. Of course, I was aware of rumors and things of that nature, but I just never really paid much attention to it. I was getting my education through college and medical school and residency, and I was very busy and just didn't really have a lot of time to spend with something that I just was very peripherally acquainted with, So it wasn't until I moved with my family here to Helena back in 1988 that, and I started working on the medical staff of St. Peter's, that I met Dr. Marcel, who's an ENT surgeon here in town. And I think he moved to Helena in like 1978. So he'd been here 10 years before I ever arrived. And anyway, because he's a surgeon and I work as an anesthesiologist, of course, our paths crossed in the operating room quite often. So, I got to know him very well over that time.
Now, how did the subject come up of how did that all happen? Were you just sitting talking somewhere one day and all of a sudden the subject came up?
No, actually, the best I can recall, I think one evening I had been watching some television, which I really don't watch a lot of television, but one evening I guess I had been drawn to this documentary program about the Roswell incident, and I heard his name mentioned and actually
really
saw him. Actually saw him, I think on the TV, giving his testimony about what he knew about it, and I was kind of shocked, just to see that this man that I knew and worked with as a surgeon, because he had never actually mentioned this to me before. And so I think, the next time I saw him, which was probably just 2-3 days later, we're in the operating room together, and I said, "Hey, Jess, I didn't know that you were a firsthand witness and directly involved in that whole incident that took place at Roswell." And so he said, "Yeah, I was. That was my father that picked up the material out of the desert and brought it home and displayed it to my mother and I on the kitchen floor." And so that was one sort of characteristic about him, was that he didn't go around announcing to people, "Hey, I've got a great story to tell." I probably knew him 6 months before I ever heard from him that this was, and I was the one that brought it up. So he was the kind of person that was a very humble individual, and if you were interested and you wanted information about it and wanted to discuss it with him, then he was never hesitant at all to sit down and have a conversation about it, but he did not go around trying to convince people that he had a story that they needed to listen to, Was there ever,
that you were aware of, was there ever any, sort of like ridicule talking behind his back or anything like that? Or did he get support from, fellow workers on the staff?
Yeah, I think everybody that I knew on the medical staff at St. Peter's had a great deal of respect for Dr. Marcel, and I never heard anybody speak negatively or unkindly or any kind of ridicule about it. And I think that's what makes the difference between people who only hear about someone who's had one of these profound UFO related experiences and people that actually know those individuals as people, as friends and coworkers. And when you do know them and you you realize the type of people that they are and the quality of the work that they do, then it becomes much easier to believe, what they tell you, even if it's something that's completely out of the usual realm of your belief system, And I think that was the case with everybody that worked with Dr. Marcel at the hospital. If you knew him, you knew that he was not the kind of person that was going to be making up these grandiose tales and telling them on national television, nor would he make up these things, telling his family, his close friends, these about this incident and be untruthful about it. So
yeah, I consider him. I mean, just from only observations of seeing him on different films, but just he seemed like a very humble, very nice guy. And I have spoken to his son, Jesse Marcel III, a few times, and he told us, he was on this show, and he told us how the whole thing really did change his life. He built his own little observatory in the backyard. He started from scratch, and
yes, he did.
Yeah, and but no, I always, I like I said, I never spoke to him, but I always had a lot of respect to him, and respect for him. Tried to get him on the show, and just my timing was off. And actually, I had found out like a week later, after one of the times I tried to get in touch with him, that he had passed away, which was, I know he wasn't a real young person, but still, it just seems like it was too soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he was, I want to say he was 78 years old when he passed away in August of 2013.
Yeah, and, he didn't seem that, he just seemed so much younger than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he always, he was quite an athlete, downhill skier, runner. He took good care of himself, and so he, was pretty healthy all his life, as far as I know. As long as I knew him, he was. Until he, went off to fight the war in Iraq. He was in the Army National Guard for years and years, virtually the whole time I knew him, which was for probably 25 years or more. He was a helicopter pilot in the National Guard here in Helena, and so volunteered actually at the age of 68 to go off to Iraq, and served 2 consecutive tours of duty there in Iraq.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, he was
a
kind
patriot.
of interesting that, yeah, he was. He was a patriot, and I always found it sort of surprising to me that despite what happened with the Roswell incident, that he remained very supportive and engaged with the U.S. military, and didn't seem to hold any grudges at all about what transpired, with his father relative to the Roswell incident. And I think he just accepted, as all good soldiers do, the judgment of the people that made these decisions a long time ago about how this was going to be handled, and how this information was going to be managed. And he just seemed to say, well, that's what they decided to do, and that's what we have to go along with, So I always found his attitude kind of interesting. I'm not sure that I would have been quite so willing to, brush all of that aside and continue to be so engaged as he was with the U.S. military. But yeah, he was definitely a patriot, no question.
I wondered what if there was such different times. You go back to 1947, 2 years after the end of the war. that there was a real strong sense of patriotism then, and and people really listened to what the government had to say. Pardon me. And it just makes me wonder, what would it be like if Roswell happened today? I've never really thought of it, but there's so many things that are different. First of all, someone could be out, Braswell, or whatever his name is, Max Bazel, or whatever his name was, could have been out on his ranch with an iPhone taking pictures.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. They probably would have been all over the internet that day.
Been all over Twitter and Facebook, and and then the cover-up. The one thing that I think about Roswell, if it was just a mogul or a weather balloon or whatever they claimed what it was, why would they make such a to-do about picking up every single little tiny scrap on the location, about flying the debris off to different Air Force bases and all that? Why would there be such a fuss? I mean, that's the big question about Roswell. And why did the military, the Air Force, lie like 4 and 5 times, whatever it is, all the way into the 1990s, talking about, instead of just denying that there was any bodies, they said, no, they're crash dummies. There's just so many moving parts. There is a bit of mythology that goes along with Roswell. You drive through the town itself, and it's become, it's sort of a town of almost, I want to say, ridicule. There's all types of alien things going on there, and everything that kind of would sort of downplay and just make someone driving through there. I mean, I actually personally was contacted by a friend. Just in general conversation, he said he went into Roswell just out of curiosity, and this was way before I ever did this show or really had I had a sight before I had a sighting and was really interested that much in UFOs. And he basically said, people are crazy there. You should see, people are dressed as aliens. And I don't know if he went during the July celebration or whatever, but it just made him say, what a bunch of BS that is. And so I think there's a lot of myth that goes with Roswell, along with the little bits and pieces of truth that must still be out there.
Well, yeah, and I don't think any of us should be surprised in the least that initially the whole thing was covered up. I think that we should all definitely be questioning whether it's still appropriate today for that cover-up to be continued. I think we're now on our about 3rd edition of explanations from the U.S. military of how they, explain what happened there, and none of the explanations has been really, I think, factual or adequate, in my opinion, and certainly according to, what I was told by Dr. Marcel, and for people that remain skeptical about it, I just think that if you consider that Jess's father, Jesse A Marcel Sr., Major Marcel, was he was the chief intelligence officer of the 509 bomb group, which was the only nuclear armed squadron in the world in 1947. They would not have had a person who was not very competent in that position, and I'm quite certain that Jess's father would have been able to identify really any kind of conventional material from a balloon or an aircraft or what have you. So the fact that both Jess and his father have always maintained that this material was not from this planet, then I just don't question that. I don't find it hard to believe. It's a big universe out there. I think it's very likely that there are other civilizations that are far ahead of humanity, at least in their technological development. And I don't think that we should be at all surprised that some of them have found their way here.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah. As far as the Roswell celebration goes, that's just people cashing in on sensationalizing something that really was quite a serious, really a landmark event in the history of our world and mankind. And it's something I think that hopefully one day people will begin to really consider just how momentous that event was and how meaningful it is to, I think, to the future of humanity. But I've never been to the Roswell Summer Festival. Maybe someday I'll go.
It makes me wonder too. Also, what are things going to be like in, say, 100 years from now? Say, well, let me back up with that a little bit. Let's just say, before we actually know for sure, the word's out there, everyone accepts that we are being visited somehow by either a disclosure or a major event. Until that time, I wonder, say 50 years in the future, what Roswell is going to be like. If it, unfortunately, 99% of the people that were alive and witnessed are gone, and and things tend to turn into all kinds of crazy myths and things over the years as time goes by. So it would be interesting to know, if you could possibly know, what things will be like. In our chat room, we have a question that came up there from Phil. And do you know anything more about the military/government official that took Jesse Marcel behind closed doors and told him things about UFOs? This person thinks it happened in Washington, D.C. Do you know anything about that?
Dr. Marcel and I talked about that event. He was contacted by, I'm blocking on his name right now, but I think this was someone in the Carter administration. And he got a call from this individual saying, we'd like for you to come to Washington and speak with us about this event. And Linda Marcel, Jess's wife, was actually quite concerned about him being called to Washington about this particular topic, and was, I think, a little bit worried when he left. But apparently they sent him a plane ticket. He went to the White House and got together with this individual, and he told me that they took him to a secured room, which was underground, several levels, and that this individual, I wish I could remember his name. He was one of the people that was sort of higher up in. I think this was in the Carter administration, but anyway, apparently there was a book on the table that was Whitley Strieber's book, I believe, that one that sort of was a fictional account of, well, it was written as a sort of historical fiction book that sort of covered the events of the Roswell incident, and so they asked Dr. Marcel if he had any other information that he wished to share with them about the Roswell incident, and he told them no, that he really didn't. He had publicly spoken about everything that he knew about what he saw and what his father said to him, and he said that this man put his finger on this book and said, "Well, what's in this book is not fiction." And Jess replied, "Well, I know that. I already know that. I've seen it. I've handled it." And that's about all that I recall him telling me, but he did tell me that personally. I think that story, if you look around the internet, you can probably find an account of that somewhere. But that's all I really can remember about what we discussed about that.
That's actually pretty amazing, really, if you think about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. A question came in through email here, and by the way, the listener can always email me. Every Sunday, I post who the upcoming guest is, and you're welcome to email me during the week at martin@podcastufo.com. Any questions you'd like to ask the upcoming guest. So this question was emailed from Kerry, and he was wondering if Jesse Marcel ever spoke to you about the town people directly affected by the Roswell incident. Was he ever able to talk to you about that?
No, I don't remember ever really having any discussions with him about anybody else in the town. You know, I recall him saying, he was 10 or 11 years old at the time, and then after after they began to cover up what happened and changed all of the reports in the newspapers, etc. And his father came home and he said, basically, we're not to talk about this anymore, ever again in public. And he said, when my dad told me that, I just said, well, okay, and went about riding my bike and, being an 11-year-old boy. But I don't remember him ever mentioning the names of any other individuals. I'm sure he knew quite a number of them, but I don't remember ever discussing that with him.
Okay, and up on the message board, we have a question. Do you think the Roswell incident spurred a complete denial protocol regardless of evidence or testimony? In other words, did officials then set media protocol after the announcement of the disc found and the subsequent reversal in the press?
Well, I think that they went into a full-scale, suppression of that information by every means they could. And I think that included, swearing people that were there to secrecy and threatening some people in the town that were civilians. And, I think that they took whatever measures they felt they had to do to keep this event completely off the radar.
The part about them threatening just civilians, that always baffles me. I can't think of any other case. I'm sure there are cases out there, but I can't think of any other cases. And getting back to earlier, kind of when we were talking about would the government cover it up? Does the government lie? I just had Heather Wade on a few minutes ago, and we were talking about, I listened to this show the other night on her show, and it was a ex-CIA, very important. He had many very important international roles, and he's on her show saying, yes, the government lies. It lies, and he said, and he was talking about torture, basically. This was a whistleblower that went to jail for revealing that, the only one that went to jail for revealing that there was torture in Guantanamo Bay. And he said, he talked about, he goes, and George Bush said, there was no torture, and he lied. And, he's talking about the government just plain lies. And it's amazing. I find that amazing. And this is another case. And, you're going back, 60 some odd years, or almost, is it 70 years? 70 years.
60, yeah, pretty close to 70 years now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this was an unprecedented event. I mean, this is an event that occurs initially, at least, one time in the development of a complex society designed by a intelligent civilization of, in our case, human beings. Something like this it's stupendous, and the social the possible social ramifications of this have not even been realized yet. Almost 70 years later, but one day they will be. And I think the implications for our civilization are going to be tremendous with respect to a whole wide variety of different topics.
Yes, I noticed in the brochure that you handed me out in Phoenix about the Jesse Marcel Library. You have this little pamphlet that you hand out, and you address a lot of these situations in that pamphlet. What things would change if there was disclosure, and the revelation that, yes, we are being visited. I personally, one of the things I think is that I don't, as big of a deal as it would be, like the most amazing news of the millennia, maybe, that there are other intelligent beings out there. If that became public knowledge, I don't think there's going to be a big upheaval in society like the past predictions. I just don't see that. I think the more we get used to the idea that there's Earth-like planets out there, and the more that people accept that there's possibly life out there, the less of an impact this will make. What's your take on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, and that may have been one of the goals, relative to the cover-up, is just to present this information to humanity at a later date when we had sort of caught up a little bit with what they, I'm sure, recognized at the very moment they laid eyes on it, and started looking through this material, that this was something that was far beyond present-day technology back in 1947, and that relative to what they were seeing there, that our technology back then was pretty primitive and may still be so today. But I think basically part of it's just been a matter of trying to buy time, for our society to catch up in our thoughts and our technology, our spiritual development as well, and hopefully be better equipped at some point in time. And I have no idea when the powers that be are going to determine that they think the time is right for this to happen. I have to think that it's probably going to be pretty soon, but who knows? I'm sure
think people have been saying that since the 1950s, though.
Yeah,
they really have. There's a question again on the message board. Were there previous instances? I don't think there were any previous instances where the government officials at first announced something like a UFO and then retracted it right away. I can't think of any. I can think of a lot of instances where there was some type of cover-up. For instance, the Phoenix lights. There were flares shot off afterwards that the Air Force could say, yes, it was just flares, although that was at 10 o'clock when the Phoenix lights sighting happened, more like 8 o'clock. Excuse me. So I understand there are instances like that, but not particular to what this listener is asking. I can't think of any. Can you, of any incidences where there was a cover-up right away about another UFO crash or UFO?
No, I can't think of any right offhand. And that may be because certainly I'm sure that systems became designed to be in place very quickly after that event happened to prevent another possible, incident from getting out of hand and away from the military and intelligence agencies. So probably I would say it's likely that they started making plans quite right away to jump on these things before they almost escaped their oversight, as Roswell almost did.
Right. There's a lot of need to know situations compartmentalized in the government, and which makes me wonder, is there anyone today in the government that actually knows the truth about Roswell, since we're talking about Roswell? Or is it so disjointed at this point that there's no knowledge in the government at all about Roswell? Is that something that Jesse ever pondered or you ever thought about?
I never really discussed that with him. But I have to think that there certainly would be records somewhere, put away about, to historically document what happened. And so I would be very surprised if all of those had been destroyed. And, I think it would be quite a simple matter for any documents and stuff like that to be hidden away. And, even in places where we wouldn't think to look, but I just have to think that it's very likely that if there's nobody alive to give a personal account of what happened there, that there will always be available some sort of records that have been, put away in some very secure storage to document what really was probably the most momentous event in the history of mankind.
Yeah, I would say. Now, there was the ex-CIA agent Chase Brandon, who actually said that he saw the thing, I don't understand that whole situation. I don't know if you've looked into it or at all, but he was saying that he saw a box that said Roswell. To me, I think that's the last. It doesn't make any sense. It would be the last thing in the world that if there was actually Roswell artifacts in a box somewhere, hidden somewhere, it wouldn't say Roswell. It would be numbered or something like that. It would some type of code. But unless, maybe I'm totally wrong about that. I don't know. But have you ever looked into Chase Brandon and what he said?
Yeah, I've heard what he said, and I think I did a little bit of checking to find out if he was who he said he was, and I came to the conclusion that he was who he said he was, and therefore I don't have any reason to think that he was lying about it. I know there have been a lot of people who think that he was lying, but I don't see. To me, all of these revelations that we get from people like Chase Brandon are part of the process that we're going through here, where we're being sort of gradually, very slowly, and I think for me, it's slow enough that it's quite frustrating, being sort of conditioned to be able to accept all of this new reality in stride, and just to be able to roll with it right away. And I suspect that statements like that come out periodically from people like Chase Brandon are intended to be part of that process.
So in a way, do you think, in a roundabout way, do you think he was sort of like a disinformation agent in a way to soften the whole situation? Is that what you're getting at, or?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily even say it was disinformation. What he said may well be true. None of us are going to be able to walk into that Langley CIA library or facility or whatever it was to prove whether he's right or wrong. So there's really, I think what he said could very well be true. But even if it wasn't true, just the underlying theme of what he was trying to get at, I think, is the important aspect of it. And that is to have somebody who was a lifetime career CIA in the clandestine services group of the CIA, coming out on national radio and saying that he saw this box of materials. And whether there was a box of materials, I think is really kind of not that important. Really, the message was Roswell happened, and there's evidence to support that statement. And it was a UFO, and it was extraterrestrial, and he saw the bodies, or pictures of the bodies. So that's the important part. Whether the box exists or not, really, I don't even care that much. I just think it's remarkable that somebody in the clandestine services of the CIA, I mean, you know that he didn't get on national radio and make a statement like that without having clearance to do so.
Yeah, you would think
sure.
so.
Well, yeah,
because he would be in some pretty deep trouble if he didn't, I would think.
Yeah, sure. I mean, these guys, you know, even if they retire from the CIA, they're never actually gone from their duties as far as those kinds of things are concerned, you know. So I'm quite sure that he was acting as he had been cleared to do. And so do I think people should pay attention to it? Absolutely, I do. Yeah.
Do you think that, say, American citizens should be aware that there has been a cover-up?
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
Do you think that there would, when it comes to the UFO subject, I don't know how many people really think about it, though. You know, I mean, that's the part where I know that a lot of people I know, and, you know, we meet at, like, the Phoenix conference out there, and we're surrounded by people that have a real interest in it. But the average American, with a busy life, sometimes I wonder how much the average American really even thinks about it or cares. You know, I imagine if it's something that would hit them in the face, you know, in other words, all of a sudden they see a UFO or something like that, those people would seem to care. But the average person, I'm wondering how much they would actually care. Excuse me.
Well, yeah, I think that probably the average person doesn't care too much about this because it doesn't directly affect or impact their lives so far as they know. And in my opinion, it does affect all of our lives quite profoundly. But it's hard to imagine, you know, the degree to which it might be affecting our lives based upon the society that we're living in and how it might have been different today had the world been told the truth 70 years ago. You know, we can sort of sit and ponder about how things could possibly be different today in this world that we're living in, and I think it might be quite different. But for the average person who's just, you know, out there going to their job every day and coming home to their families in the evening and having their friends and some social time, you know, there's not a lot of time left over really for things like this. And I'm not sure actually that had I not known Dr. Marcel for as long as I did and as well as I did, that I would have become that interested in it. It's possible maybe that I wouldn't have. I don't know, you know. But as I said, when you know him, as I did, and spoke with him about this, and you know, unfortunately, I don't think that I have a lot of extra information to offer people about the details of what happened. You know, basically, I probably know about the same, you know, amount of level of detail about what actually happened as a lot of people that have actually looked at this in detail, you know. But the fact that I heard it from him and I knew him and I know what kind of person that he was makes it much more real to me, you know. And so unfortunately most people don't have that opportunity to know him or someone else that was directly connected to the event. But when you hear about it from a person that you do know well and you feel that you can trust what they say, then it just changes the whole situation for you. You know, you suddenly become aware that, wow, this was real. This happened. And then you start to realize what that means. Well, it does mean that our government engineers our society's perceptions of reality in certain things that they think are of grave enough importance to do that.
Right.
And this was one of those events that is, had the potential and still does to change the fabric of our reality.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah.
I'd like to ask you a question, and we're getting right at the top of the hour here, coming right up. In the second part of the show, I want to ask you about your crop circle research, and also about the citizen hearing on disclosure, et cetera. But for right now, can you tell us a little bit about what is the Jesse Marcel Library?
Yeah, well, when Dr. Marcel came back from Iraq, he was quite a different person than when he left. He was living in conditions there that I think were responsible for why he came back with a pretty remarkable case of PTSD. And it was very obvious to me when we would sit in his living room and we would be talking and the door would slam, he'd come up out of his chair. And he was never like that before he went to Iraq. He was as you can imagine, having someone that's very reactive like that is not a great thing for a surgeon. And so I noticed that quite dramatically when he came back from Iraq, and that got better over several years, but it never completely went away. And then the other thing that happened, and I don't know if this was related to the time he spent in Iraq, but I suspect that it probably was, is he developed a peripheral neuropathy in his legs and had a lot of difficulty with what we call ataxia, where he was unsteady, on his feet, and ended up having to wear braces on both legs because of bilateral foot, both feet foot drop. And so, he came back in a sort of a debilitated condition, from when he left after these 2 tours of duty in Iraq. And so I spoke with him about, basically one day I just said, Jess, you're not getting any younger, and this story that you have been trying to get across to the world is going to perhaps go away, when you go away. And so maybe it would be a good idea if I opened up a library and I named it after your father. And so he said, well, I think my father would be really very honored to have that. And so if you feel like that's what you want to do, and you feel that this would help to carry on the story of Roswell and help to educate people. And I thought, well, what better place to try to help educate people than a library? And so I went ahead and opened up the Jesse A Marcel Library, which I'm kind of thinking maybe I should change the name of it now to the Jesse A Marcel Memorial Library. But it's located near my home, just outside of Helena. And it's open on Tuesday evenings from 7 to 10 p.m. And I've got quite a number of books and articles that I've printed from the internet, and DVDs from like speakers that have presented at the International UFO Congress each year. I've got, entire sets of DVDs of the speakers that have been there, and other DVDs that probably many of your listeners have seen or heard. But yeah, so I just try to make this information available to the public and people that become interested in learning more about it. And there's, quite a few people that have come in there that have really not known that much about the UFO phenomenon, but want to learn more about it. And I think our society is starting to realize that there's definitely something to this,
Now, this library, do you have old books old UFO books in there as well?
I do have a few. Some of George Adamski's books, Wendell Stevens' books. So I have a few books that are older books. Problem with a lot of these that I'm running into with older UFO books is a lot of them are now becoming collector's items.
Yes.
And some of them will range up in the $200-$300 range.
That's
and
right.
Since I'm financing this library on my own, then I try to stick with some of the more mainstream books. Like an example would be Philip Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. Of course, I have Dr. Marcel's book, The Roswell Legacy, on the shelf. I have Leslie Kane's book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Military Officials Go on the Record. That's an excellent book, and one that I would recommend to anybody who's trying to just start to learn more information about the UFO phenomenon. That would probably be the book where I would start with. So a lot of these books are really, that have quite a bit of good information, are not that old. Going back to Richard Dolan's, UFOs in the National Security State, I think that's probably been out published for 20 years maybe.
Is it that long?
I don't remember when it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It may not have been that long, but a lot of this published information that we have available about the facts about the UFO phenomenon have not been out that long. So
now let me ask you this: we have quite a few listeners to the show. Are you looking for people to donate books?
Sure. Yeah, I think it would probably be best for them to contact me by email and ask me if we already have the book, because
right.
I don't want to end up with a whole bunch of redundant, copies of books, but I have pretty limited bookshelf space right now, although there is quite a bit of room for expansion. But yeah, if anybody has any books or any other UFO related documents, materials that they want to have preserved, and archived, absolutely, I would love to hear from them and find out if it's something that we don't have, that I would definitely like to bring it to the library.
All right, I'll talk to you a little bit about that. I have a number of books myself. Pardon me, and I have. I'm one of these people that have. I'm into antiques and fine art and all that, and I'm really into early UFO books. I would never give them up if I find them, but and I have a lot of dibs out there to a lot of antique book dealers that just deal in libraries of books all the time, and they all know that I want any UFO books that they come across. So, so the website is jaml.org. Did I say that right?
Yes, that's correct. jaml.org.
And so a listener can contact you through that website. There's a contact form, I believe, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So we're at the top of the hour, and going into hour two, pardon me, and I really do apologize to the listener out there for my coughing. Hopefully in another week or two or 3 or 4 or whatever, it'll be gone. There's a question up on the message board before we get into the other subjects that I thought we could touch on. Some people conclude that sleep paralysis and alien abduction memory recall could be possibly related to patients with unintended intraoperative awareness taking place during medical procedures. What are your thoughts on this phenomenon?
Yeah, I've heard this possible explanation for these individuals that are claiming to have been abducted, and I guess that I haven't really seen any actual studies that have been printed or published in the anesthesia literature that address that particular issue. And I don't know if the people that have been making this allegation, to what extent they gathered data about, how many people that claim to have been previously abducted were, had previous general anesthesia or not. So I don't really have a lot to offer. I guess that as far as the abduction phenomenon in general goes, I accept that very likely is happening, but I haven't really done a lot of study on it. Of course, I've read a couple of Dr. John Mack's books and Jacob's books, and I am aware of it, and I think that there is very likely something to it, but I don't look upon it as being something that it's not my primary mission. My thing is really just to try to help the American people become aware that this is real and it's important, and that we've been misled about it, and that we need to begin to let the people who took it upon themselves to withhold this information from American citizens, and indeed, all world citizens, that we're ready for this, that we can handle the truth, that we are mature enough, and perhaps I maybe would say secular enough now, where I don't think that it's going to be a big problem for most people to accept this into their worldview. But as far as the abduction phenomenon goes, I do think it's very likely that it's real. And it's another reason I think that we need to have all of this brought out into the public domain, because these people that are going through these experiences need to have avenues available to them where they can get proper therapy for what would be for me, a very emotionally traumatic event. And the cover-up of all of this, I think, has unfortunately resulted in citizens being more mistrustful of each other. Instead of when somebody comes forward and says, I saw this UFO, or I was abducted, or what have you, because the cover-up tells us all that no, they're crazy, no, they're liars, no, they're photoshoppers, no, it has undermined the trust that citizens have for one another, and if that had only gone on for a year or two, maybe no big deal, but 67 years of having our trust in each other undermined by a big fat lie is not good for our society. And so I think that this abduction phenomenon is a good example of why all of this needs to be brought out into the public domain and aired truthfully, so that we can all begin to help one another to come to terms with this, and especially these people that are going through these experiences.
You mentioned just a minute ago that abduction is not your main focus of study or anything like that, but if you would have to put an answer to the question, why are people being abducted, what would you say? Well,
of course, anybody on this planet, their answer to that question is going to be pure speculation, right?
Yes, I understand that. But one of the things I like to do in the show is to get different people's perspectives.
Right.
A lot of times they're similar, actually.
Well, I suppose that my feeling about this all is that, like in one of the lectures that we attended at the International UFO Congress, was given by a man named Dr. Joel Lewels, Lewels.
Yeah, former guest on the show.
Yeah, and so he spoke about UFOs and religion, and during his presentation, he he showed slides of these paintings that came from, the 14th century, the 16th century, and when you look at those paintings with the eyes of someone who knows that UFOs are real and knows that this phenomenon has been going on here for a long time, and you look at those paintings, you realize that the artists that painted those paintings, they saw a UFO, and they included that in their painting. And they're so obvious, in fact, that you can't believe that humanity has gone on this long without going, hey, what is that? But they really are quite obvious in these paintings. And so what that tells us is that people have been seeing UFOs in the skies for at least centuries. And, there's no reason to think that this hasn't been going on here for tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of years. And so I don't discount the possibility that extraterrestrials have been involved in genetically engineering human beings from indigenous primate populations here on this planet, from the beginning. Mm-hmm. It would not surprise me a bit to find out that was the case. And so this may be just that ongoing program, what we're seeing. These abductions may not be anything new. This may be something that has been also going on for tens or hundreds of thousands of years. I sort of think, human beings tend to be pretty egocentric when it comes to what we've been able to learn and accomplish technologically, but really compared to what may be out there in the universe, we may be kindergartners playing in a sandbox, and right. So these genetic, these skills in genetic engineering may be quite advanced, and perhaps when you gain the ability to move about the universe and you've learned perhaps almost all there is to know about the physical universe and the physical laws that govern it, and maybe this is what you do, is you go around the universe, tending different gardens and trying to make them a better place.
Yes. One of the things you do here, going back to abductions or not necessarily abductions, let's say close encounters, is you do hear that we should be taking better care of our Earth. Mm-hmm. Have you ever looked into any of that?
Well, certainly, we've heard this from many abductees. The one that comes to my mind, probably because you and I heard her speak as well at the International UFO Congress, was Emily Prim,
right,
who was one of the students there at the Ariel School in Zimbabwe back in the late 1990s when a UFO landed on the school ground and all of these 60 children went over to it and apparently had a telepathic communication from two beings who tried to impress upon them their responsibilities for being better stewards of the planet, and it sounded like gave quite a grim assessment of what would likely happen on Earth. She described this feeling of trees falling over and human beings suffocating, and in other words, these were the feelings that were impressed upon her through this telepathic communication at the time that she said that she stood 5 feet away from one of these beings. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's certainly obvious to all of us, isn't it? I mean, so I'm sure that we're not even a neutral third party, right? We're the perpetrators of all of this, and it's become quite obvious to most of us that we've got a serious problem here with the environment, that really is going to have to be addressed. So to another party that we're just sort of observing all this going on, I think probably is horrifying, to watch.
Yes, I mentioned a number of times on the show, and So pardon me, listeners, or regular listeners, I should say, that I spoke with someone that said he actually worked with the Air Force, and basically when this was many years ago, and I asked him why are we being, if UFOs are coming, why? And he basically said we're a petri dish, and that's what the government thinks. That's the government's thoughts on us, and it kind of goes along with what you're saying. It's very possible. I agree with you there that I think it is very possible that we have been part of some type of experiment or have been genetically modified, so to speak, for hundreds of thousands of years. I always think the scientific study that human beings, as we know them, are only 200,000 years old or so. It just doesn't seem possible that we could just appear out of a quick evolution. I don't know. That's a whole different should be a whole different other type of podcast, but it's interesting anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't really think of humanity as a petri dish. I mean, that's sort of a demeaning way to, I think, sort of demeaning or minimalizing to the real grandeur of the fact that we have evolved here on this planet, and it's a beautiful planet, and we are sort of the de facto stewards of this planet, and we need to take responsibility for that, and it's quite a grave responsibility, actually, and a very important one. And so I don't look upon humanity as being simply a petri dish or some kind of an experiment. I think we have to look upon it in something with much more grandeur than those terms imply to me. This is an important project. The nurturing and development and evolution of a civilization of intelligent beings that are trying to figure out, how to coexist with one another and how to incorporate these new ideas into our worldviews. These are huge challenges, They wouldn't be easy, and I'm sure they weren't easy for these other beings that evolved in these other civilizations so long ago. All of these challenges, particularly the challenge of nuclear weapons, is clearly, I think, something that confronts every single civilization of intelligent beings who finally discover the atom, and they discover you can either use it for good things or you can use it for bad things. And if their conditions on their planet and their social evolution has been anything like that of ours, then they struggled with these very same issues. And
absolutely,
apparently they found a way to survive it, and it still remains to be seen whether we will or not.
I guess
I sometimes wonder if we could run a time lapse camera of the universe that could somehow incorporate all the galaxies with their planets and all of these intelligent civilizations that have evolved around this gigantic universe, if we wouldn't see these planets just going up in mushroom clouds all over the place.
Wow.
Because those civilizations could not cope with and could never find a way out of their self-imposed trap of creating nuclear weapons for destructive purposes, which is the exact situation that we're trapped in now. And I think that nuclear weapons may in fact be some kind of a filter that filters out intelligent civilizations who just don't have the right stuff.
Really good points you're bringing up there. It's I've heard it said it's getting through the bottleneck of technology.
Yeah.
And surviving it. And the one thing that we tend to do, or I know that I tend to do when thinking, and a lot of scientists do actually as well, not saying that I'm a scientist in any type of way, but a lot of times we think on human terms. And for us to project that another being out there is as violent as we are, yes, I would say that there's probably a number of civilizations that are as violent as we are, but there may be some that aren't at all. In that particular case, you would think that they would be able to evolve. I understand that, part of evolution and violence and all that is a survival technique, and excuse me, but it really makes you wonder what type of society's out there, and you could speculate all different kinds of things, and it's really fascinating if you think about it. Like, what is the equivalent of someone getting their first car on another planet, or their first kiss, or all that stuff? It's pretty fascinating if you really think about it.
Yeah, it is. It is. And this process that we're going through, where we're basically trying to leave this law of the jungle mentality behind and trying to learn how to live together and take care of one another and love one another and be existing on a sort of a higher plane than where we as primates with our monkey minds came from. And so that's not an easy process, I'm sure it isn't for any civilization, but I have a feeling that they all have had to go through it. Mm-hmm. But I have grave doubts about whether those that cannot lift themselves up to that higher plane do escape what you referred to as this bottleneck of technology, or this nuclear weapons filter, as I conceptualize it. And they just cease to exist, And I'm sure that's been the case with many, many, many other civilizations that would have evolved out there, but not for the fact that they just could not bring themselves to love one another, trust one another, take care of one another, emphasize the importance of the biosphere of their planet, and acknowledge that had to be taken care of first, because all of our lives are dependent on our biosphere, right?
Yeah, and we're a territorial species as well, and that's the problem of that's the crux of a lot of the issues that we have. Would you consider yourself, as far as disclosure goes, I know that you at least attended the citizen hearing on disclosure. Would you consider yourself a bit of an activist?
Yeah, I would. I try to at least once a week set aside 3 hours of my life to get together with people and to try to help educate people and get people to talk about this and discuss their experiences. Like at the library, had quite a number of people who have come in and been willing to tell their stories to us. And that's one of the points that I try to make about the library is this is a place for people to come to talk about this subject and feel that they're in a safe space where they can discuss really basically anything about it, about being abducted, about, really anything that is important to them, but they would feel uncomfortable talking about perhaps in their workplace or even among their own family members. They can come to the library and talk about these things with us, and we're all very eager to listen and to discuss this subject and anything really related to it. So yeah, I guess in that way I consider myself an activist. I really went to the citizen hearing on disclosure with Dr. Marcel at his invitation, and my first reaction was that I didn't really want to go. It was a week out of my life. It was the cost of a plane ticket. And I thought, gee, is this something, why don't you go, Jess, and you come back and tell me, all about it. But then I thought, well, he wasn't getting around too well at that time. He had this problem with this neuropathy. His balance was a little off. And I thought, well, maybe I should just go along. And if not, just help him with baggage and, down from here to there. As it turned out, he did pretty well on his own. But anyway, I decided to go, and I bought the ticket, and I went. And I was really quite glad that I did, because the event was, really, I think, for me, it was an incredible event. I got many of the people that trying to enlighten people and awaken people to this new reality. And I got to meet them and speak with them and shake their hand, firsthand. So that was nice. And, one of the individuals that I spoke to was this Oscar Maria Huerta, who was a Peruvian fighter pilot in the Peruvian Air Force. And so I happened to sit down next to him and asked him, why he was there. And he speaks a little English and I speak some Spanish, so we were able to communicate. And anyway, he did give me this affidavit that he signed in front of me, which basically described this event that took place while he was a fighter pilot, and a UFO was hovering over their Air Force base, and he was ordered to go shoot it down. And as far as I know, he's one of the only fighter pilots that ever actually, fired these 30 millimeter missiles point blank at this object, and it had no effect on the object. And so, it was nice to be able to meet people like that in person who have had these experiences and hear their stories and get, this document for him, which I have in the library, and periodically I show to people who come in and who are skeptics about all of this, try to show them things that, are, I think, a good indicator that this is real. Yeah, he was an interesting thing. One thing I will say about his experience is he chased this UFO. I mean, he didn't just fire at this thing once. He kept chasing it aggressively, offensively, for until his jet, he said, started to alarm that if he didn't turn around, that he wouldn't be able to make it back to the air base that he came from. And he looked at me and he said, that the thought that I had there was, when I turn my back on this thing, it's going to blow me out of the sky.
Of course.
And he said, I was pleasantly surprised, obviously, to find that it did not. It did not behave with retribution as we might think it would after being attacked like this and
Absolutely.
Chased around so aggressively. And so I think, for me, I find that real story, to be reassuring, that these beings that we're dealing with, they realize the stage that we are in our development, just as we would realize the stages of a child's development, and we would make room for allowing for some errors in judgment, and we would try to teach in different ways to improve upon those judgment skills, but not necessarily with the back of our hand, right? And so I find that reassuring. I think that these beings that we're dealing with here are spiritually advanced people who will cut us some slack, so to speak, in as they observe our development.
I mean, I would consider, first of all, I wouldn't care who ordered me or what position I was in any type of military situation. I would not have the guts to pull the trigger on something like that, because of exactly what you're talking about. You could just be squished like a fly. I think if something like that could do what it does to get here, and it just would be no contest. And for it to have no effect, if you're firing a 30 millimeter missile, whatever it was you just said, at it, and for it to have no effect, that would be the point where I would turn and run as fast as I could.
Yeah, well, and what he said was that he fired 60 of those.
Oh my goodness. Unbelievable.
At this object. Yeah.
That must have been the most amazing thing you heard at the citizens' hearing of disclosure. Was there other stories like that? Anything similar or remarkable?
There were stories from, commercial airline pilots who have seen these things in the sky as they've been flying. There was, of course, John Callahan from the FAA, who many people have heard his story. Paul Hellyer was there from Canada, the ex-Minister of Defense of Canada, talking about his firsthand conversations with people who in the U.S. military who know about this and who confirmed to him that, yes, this is real. Edgar Mitchell's was not there in person, but he did give a video presentation. And of course, Edgar Mitchell has told us publicly that he's had confirmation inside the Pentagon, physically. He was inside the Pentagon and was told at the level of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that this, the UFO phenomenon was real, and that the Roswell event did happen and was a extraterrestrial UFO. And that, that testimony of Edgar Mitchell's can be found on YouTube.
Right.
And so, when you have people like Edgar Mitchell, and you have people like Admiral Lord Hill Norton, who would have been in essentially the Joint Chiefs of Staff of Britain, at that level of their military, and admiral of the fleet at one time, telling us that UFOs, as he refers to them, are real. Then you just wonder, how long is it going to take American citizens to finally wake up to this? It sometimes surprises me that it's taking this long. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised, because at the same time they're being told this, they're also being told by these CIA and intelligence people that I believe that have been hired and are paid to disinform and misinform the public about all of this through many different avenues. So, we're hearing one thing in one ear and we're hearing something else contradictory in the other ear. And I think people just get so confused by it that they just say, screw it, I'm not going to mess with this. And so they don't. But that's unfortunate, because if we use our minds and we pay attention to who's talking and what they're saying, and we use our discernment, I don't think this is impossible to figure out. In fact, it's just become very obvious to me what the truth is.
When you were out in Phoenix, did you listen to Merrill Cook?
I did, yes.
And he was actually a participant at the citizens hearing for disclosure, right?
He was, yes. He was there as one part of a 6-person panel of ex-congressmen and women who were there in a mock congressional hearing to hear the testimony of these 40 different witnesses there at the citizens hearing. And it was kind of interesting to watch their responses to a lot of this information that they were being given. You could see that much of it was new to them and stuff that they were completely unaware of. And so I think that they found it really quite fascinating. I don't think any of them regretted having, dedicated a week of their life to go to this and to participate in it. I think that they all found it to be quite a fascinating week and informative as well. Yeah.
Right. If you just came in and you're listening live, we're on the line with Dr. Richard O'Connor, and he has the Jesse A Marcel Library in, oh my goodness, I was going to say Montana. Where is it?
Yeah, it's near Helena, Montana.
Okay. Thought I was giving the wrong state there for a second.
No, that's right.
Now, do you think, I've had, Stephen Bassett on before, and he was actually the first guest on this show all the way back. We're 193 shows in, and he was the first one that agreed to be on my new show when I first started it. I'm not really sure if its disclosure is going to come out in a government way or not. I say I don't really think it will, because there's just too much to answer for when it comes to that. What is your thoughts on the government actually admitting there's UFOs? Do you think it will ever happen?
Oh, I'm sure it will happen eventually, but I don't think, I don't look for anything like that to come from them real soon. I think it probably will just be, over time, people will just come to accept it, that that that's just what it is. And probably only when that happens and it just becomes so widely known that this is real, that the government will finally say, yeah, okay, it is. But yeah, I'm sure they will at some point in the future. But I don't, that's really not how I think disclosure is going to happen. I think it's just disclosure is going to come from all of us continuing to share information and educate one another and talk to each other and stop ridiculing each other about this and start to take this seriously and engage with it. And I think as that happens, and I think that is happening more and more, then I think the people ourselves are going to sort of be our own means of disclosure. And we don't really, we're not children, and we don't really have to have this confirmation from big brother government about what's real and what's not. People are smart enough to figure this out for themselves.
Yeah, we have a message up on, it's not a question, it's a message up on the message board of Matthew saying he's going through his old UFO investigator newsletters, and back in 1972 they had a Gallup poll of average people that estimated that 5 million had seen UFOs back then. Pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, that is.
I mean, you think
sure
that's so long ago, and I don't think, I'm wondering if we're any closer to this coming out now. I feel like we are, but like I said earlier, people have been saying that since the 50s. They've been saying, and they feel like it's going to come out soon. And I agree. I don't think, the only thing I think about, if the government finally admits it, if they finally did, they would have so much to answer for, I think. It would be totally overwhelming. First of all, the number one question I would think was, why would you be hiding this from us? I think people would be very upset about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that a number of people in our country, or really basically all over the world, would be very upset that this has been hidden. And I think the sooner that we get beyond this, as Stephen Bassett calls it, this truth embargo, the better off that our whole society and our planet, I think, will be. It's important, I think, that we all live in reality and that we know what reality is. And with respect to this subject, the military and the intelligence agencies have done quite a marvelous job of altering that reality for us. And I think, the sooner we get past this and come to terms with this, the better off we'll be, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, they have, all the way back, starting with the Robertson panel. Pretty amazing when you think about it. A question on the message board. Do you think that the government, or part of the government, is in communication with ETs?
I don't know. I suppose that I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. In some ways I wouldn't be, but in other ways I kind of would be, because I sort of, I don't know, maybe as time has gone by, there's a prescribed way for doing this on a planet, and maybe our government and military intelligence organizations are following the prescription that has been laid out by means of this being done tens of thousands of times in other places in the universe. And it's just been determined through trial and error that this is the best way to do it. I don't know, of course. But whether or not our government is in touch with extraterrestrials, they maybe. It wouldn't surprise me, actually, if they were.
Now, do you have are you doing a research project to establish contact?
Well, I guess you could call it a research project. it's a very low budget one, of course, but unfortunately, because of this cover up, what that also means is that there's no serious funding available to do the work that needs to be done to get in touch with these civilizations and to be able to do the proper kinds of research to identify who they are and where they're coming from and what their intentions are, and all of those kinds of things. And this is especially true. One thing that I found frustrating with the crop circles, is that there's still a lot of work that could be done in unraveling the science with crop circles, but there's just no money available, and it's quite expensive to organize teams of people over in Great Britain and have these tests done on soil, and especially when they're involving, things like X-ray crystallography and these types of studies that I think would be really helpful in looking at soil samples. There's been a lot of attention focused on the plant changes that have occurred in crop circles, but not that much work has been done on soil involved in the crop circles. And I think that there's a big potential to learn new information about the crop circles through soil study. Sorry, I guess I kind of maybe got off track from your question.
That's okay. And that's okay.
But yeah,
because
my research project, you were asking me, so in a nutshell, I've assumed that a civilization coming here would be able to intercept all information emanating from our planet, that they would have the technological capability of doing that. Now, whether they have the interest in doing that is a different question, but technologically, I have no doubt that as far as our television, our radio, our internet, our Facebook, what have you, that any civilization with the technological expertise to arrive here would be able to intercept all information emanating from the planet. And so my thought was, well, I'm just going to put a message on my website that says, I'm going to mount these cameras at this latitude, this longitude, this altitude, and I'm going to ask you kindly, nicely, to come by and allow a picture of your spacecraft to be obtained. And I've also done this in another way. I've put out a big sign behind the Jesse A Marcel Library that has a potential suggested design. It's a simple design for a crop circle. And I've asked them to please produce this design in a crop field anywhere really where it would be likely to be noticed and likely to be aerial photographs so that I could see it, and so that I would know that at least this one-way communication has been established. And so about 3 years ago, I put these messages on the website about this potential crop circle design, and asking any benevolent ET groups who might see this message to please come by this latitude and longitude and allow a photograph of their craft to be obtained. And so back in November, I got a photograph after 3 years of looking through a lot of photographs. And it was a remarkable photograph. And I was very excited about it. And I thought, wow, this is it. They responded. However, it was bothering me that not only myself, but several other people too had written and said, do you think this could be a drop of water that fell in front of the camera? Oh. And I was like, no way it's a drop of water. I was just confident that it wasn't. But after the snow and ice melted off the roof enough where I could actually go up there safely, I took a turkey baster full of water and I dripped it in front of the camera. And what I found completely shocked me and really disappointed me. But what I discovered was that it's very likely that what I thought was a UFO was in fact just a drop of water that had just fortuitously dropped in front of the camera at just the right time and at the right angle and the right speed where it just looked like a pristine UFO.
I can't believe the connection here. I just realized that you're the person that had that photo just now.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of talk about this. And Mark D'Antonio, I believe, is the one who thought it was a drop of water to begin with. Am I right?
I think that he did think it was a drop of water, yes.
He's pretty brilliant when it comes to things like
Yeah,
this.
yeah. And so, yeah, for a couple
So it was
of months
you. How
there,
about that?
I was just reveling in the idea that perhaps I had made contact, in a way. I know there are a lot of people like Costa Macreas, for example, through ET Let's Talk, and Dr. Greer with the CE5 effort that he's been involved in for so long. And I'm not discounting that method of trying to get in touch with extraterrestrials. I'm just kind of a nuts and bolts kind of guy,
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, why not try this? It's kind of almost like sending an email or something, and so I tried it. And of course, for a couple of months there, until the snow and ice melted off my roof and I could go up there and actually test this hypothesis, I was quite enamored with the idea that I may have actually made one-way communication with some group of extraterrestrials. But for every listener, if you saw that, it turns out that was not the case. That I proved adequately to myself that it was in fact just a drop of water.
I saw the picture. It was really actually quite amazing, and you got a lot of press out of that.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, that does happen. Especially the British newspapers love UFO stories, and they go kind of crazy on that. I was reading today. I think I have to bring this. I think you're just going to find this humorous because all over the news, how the news can get carried away, is this talk about this Mexican farmer who built a pyramid after he was ordered by an alien from a faraway planet. Well, the story goes on. Raimundo Corona, I guess that's his name. You read down in the story, and it says Mr. Corona, 33 years old, claims that aliens visited him in 1984 and told him to build the temple in the form of a pyramid. Well, if you do the math, 1984. He was minus 1 year old.
Oh, huh.
He wasn't even born yet. So
that's an inconvenient truth.
You think this is just a bogus story, but it's all over the internet. And what happens is someone will write a bogus story. Yours wasn't a bogus situation, but unfortunately, it kind of went viral, and that's what's happening with this story when it's just someone that's having fun, and. Unfortunately, that does muddy the water. Yours was totally unintentional.
Yeah, no, it was. This is a legitimate project to try to establish some sort of communication, and it makes perfect sense to me. Like with the internet, our internet signals go out to these space-based satellites. So if you can arrive to Earth from somewhere else, within our galaxy or beyond, then clearly, you would have the technical expertise to intercept radio waves. Come on. So It just makes sense to me that this might prove to be a means of communicating, if they had any interest at all in.
Another thing though is what would I understand what you're trying to do, and it's a valiant effort, but what would make them see your posting compared to all the information that's flowing rapidly out there all the time?
I think just that the nature of the message would be different. I'm guessing, of course I don't know, but that there wouldn't be that many bits of information going out there that indicated that someone was actually trying to directly contact them in that way. So if you were filtering out all of the information, if you were filtering the information that was coming to you, that would be one thing that you might select out, is which people are trying to actually get in contact with you. You know, which people are making an honest, sincere effort to send you a message directly, one that's friendly, it's non-threatening, it's just simply saying, hey, let's establish some kind of transparent, peaceful relationship and see where it goes. And I think that they could do that. You know, I think that they would be able to select out those kinds of messages from people and perhaps, maybe at some point, pay attention to them.
Right. There's a question up there. What is your opinion of what the UFO occupants want by visiting?
My guess is that they really don't want anything. I doubt that we have anything that they really need. So my guess is that they're simply here to, as I said, you know, maybe tend the garden, to continue to observe. I mean, think of how interesting it would be for us to be able to go to another planet that had a society of intelligent people of a similar complexity to our civilization today, or maybe back how it was in 1947, and just observe that. You know, that's like reality TV to the 1,000th power. So I think, you know,
I totally agree. I think about that all the time, and like, for instance, if you were observing another society, I think it would be fascinating to know what things have been invented. You know, possibly a less intelligent society invent something that a high intelligence has never thought of. You know, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who knows? They may have seen some ideas pop up on this planet from some, you know, relatively brilliant minds that happen to look at things much differently than they do, and you know, may have been shocked by the inventiveness of some of the ideas, you know. And maybe that's what you do when you get to know pretty much whatever there is to know about the universe, is your search becomes new information, new learning. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what they're looking for. You know, I don't know.
It's all fascinating. And getting back to the citizen hearing and on disclosure, I know the last time I spoke with Steve Bassett, he said that he sent out something like 600 DVDs out to different Congress people and in Washington. And I just I haven't spoken to him since that time, and I just wondered, do you know if he ever had any responses to any of that?
No, I don't know how any congressional people have responded to Stephen Bassett. You know, I know in my own case, I've written to Senator John Tester, who's my senator here from Montana. I've actually spoken with him personally on the steps of the Montana State Capitol about this.
Really?
And that I thought that this deserved some serious attention. But, you know, I really feel that politicians are going to be the very last people to jump on the bandwagon about this. That there's just so much liability in it for them, that and so many other concerns that they have that they view. I don't necessarily, but they view them as being much more relevant and important.
Yes.
And so I think writing to your politician, you know, I've written a lot of letters. I've written letters to President Obama, to President Bush, to you know, John Tester, Pat Williams, who was a representative from Montana. Max Baucus was our representative at one time. I've written him. I've even written the American Veterinary Medical Association saying, hey, what is wrong with a professional society that will not address the cattle mutilation phenomenon? You know, what is wrong with you people? I mean, it's so obvious when you look at the excellent photographs that have been obtained by Linda Moulton Howe, among others, about these events that are continuing to happen. And yet here's a professional society of veterinarians who don't pay any attention to it, give it no credence. And I called AVMA one day and I said, I'm calling to inquire about what your AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, what your official position is about cattle mutilations and what's going on here. And the lady that I spoke with said, well, you know, about 20 years ago, the FBI did a study about this, and they determined that this was all natural predation. And so that's what we think this is. And I was like, really, come on. And she was like, well, yeah. And so I hung up the phone and I wrote a letter to AVMA and I said, you know, this is so disingenuous for you guys to take this approach to this really remarkable phenomenon that's going on. And it's really pretty well documented through Linda Moulton Howe's work. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I've written letters and letters and letters to lots of people about this. Have the letters helped? I haven't really seen that I think they've made a big difference, but you know, every little drop in the bucket may make a difference.
Right.
You know, maybe the letter that I sent to John Tester, he said, well, look, here's a serious minded citizen who seems to think there's something to this. So maybe, you know, that plants a little seed in his mind where the next time it's brought up to him by somebody else, he might take it a little bit more seriously. You know, who knows? Our lives are short and we all want instantaneous results from all of our efforts, but it's not going to work that way. You know,
That's right.
It's going to be a group effort to change, to lift up the heads of an entire planet of people and to change the worldviews of billions of people. It's a difficult, daunting, long-term project that we all need to take seriously, but not be so impatient about and expect results today.
Right. Well, on that note, we're at the end of our time, and I want to thank you so much. And please give out your website one more time, if you would.
Yeah, so it's jaml.org.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Richard. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you tonight.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it. The 2 hours went quickly.
It sure did. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone. So that's it for our show this evening. And I want to thank you all for listening. And you're either a supporter or you're listening live. And I want to thank you very much for that. Next week, we have Robert Powell on, ufologist. I believe he's in the Illinois area. And we're going to be speaking on the Stevensville case in Texas. I'm really excited. He was someone involved in that. I'm really excited to have that on the show coming up next week. I've been looking for someone to talk about that for a couple of years now, so he'll be on next week. I want to thank some people for helping out with the show. Peggy Shunning for helping with the Facebook page. Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse for the music. And I want to thank you, the listener. And we'll see you next week right here on podcastufo.com. And we'll talk to you then, and keep your eyes to the sky.